Have you ever wondered why a man pulls away right after he's looked you in the eyes, like you were the only truth that ever existed? Why he withdraws into silence just after moments of deep presence where your souls seem to echo each other in stillness? One night his hand lingered on your skin like it never wanted to let go. The next he vanished into the quiet, not with a storm, but with the unbearable weight of nothingness. No closure. No clarity, just the cold murmur of absence, leaving you questioning everything. This silence, it is not empty. It is full of meaning, full of myth. In that abyss, the masculine retreats, not always in rejection, but in reckoning. When he pulls away, he is not merely thinking about you. He is wrestling with what you awaken within him. You are not just a woman to him. You are an archetype, a mirror, a portal to parts of himself he cannot yet name, and perhaps cannot yet face. In your softness he feels his hardness. In your longing he feels his emptiness. In your gaze he sees the boy still wounded, the man still unformed, and for many men that reflection is too much to bear. The masculine, when unevolved, seeks control, predictability, safety in the logical. But the feminine is not safe. She is wild water, unknowable moonlight, the chaos that births stars. She stirs the depths, and with a single wordless look, she unravels the layers he has carefully built to hide from himself. So he leaves, not because you are too much, but because he is not yet enough to hold what you bring. In that silence, he is not always thinking, "She's not what I want." Sometimes he is thinking, "Why do I want her this much?" Or worse, "Why do I feel like I'm losing myself in her?" You see, many men are not taught how to feel. They are trained to conquer, to achieve, to dominate, but not to surrender. And loving a woman of depth requires surrender, not to her, but to the vast emotional ocean she invites him into. When you spoke your truth even gently, he felt cornered by the rawness of it. When you needed him, not to fix you, but to witness you, he felt the call to be present, and it terrified him. Because presence is not passive, it demands the death of ego. And most men are still clinging to the illusion of control, like a soldier gripping his sword long after the war has ended. He retreats, not to punish you, but to preserve himself. Or rather, the image of himself he knows. The one who doesn't feel too deeply, the one who doesn't need anyone, the one who has everything figured out. But you unmask him. And in that unveiling, you unknowingly awaken his inner chaos. His anima, the feminine within him, stirs. She wants to be integrated. She wants to be known. And you, woman, are the spark, but instead of stepping forward, he steps back, because merging with you would mean merging with the feminine within himself, and most men are not ready to meet her. So what does he think of you in his silence? He thinks of the way your presence made him feel both powerful and powerless. He thinks of your voice, not just the sound, but the truth in it, the way it cut through his masks like a sword made of light. He remembers the way your body curved, like the question he didn't know he needed to answer. The question that wasn't about you, but about himself. He does not always ghost because he doesn't care. Sometimes he disappears because he cares too much and doesn't know what to do with the ache you leave behind. You are not forgettable, you are unforgettable, and that's the problem. To the woman whose love reveals shadow, silence becomes his only defense. But do not mistake his retreat for a sign of your unworthiness. His distance speaks not of your failure, but of your fire. Some men run not because you are unlovable, but because you are the first woman who made them feel alive. And aliveness to the emotionally underdeveloped masculine feels like a threat. So, woman, do not chase. Let the silence do what your words cannot. Let him meet himself in the void he created. Let him walk the desert of his own resistance. Because the feminine who waits with dignity, who does not beg, who does not abandon herself in the name of love, she becomes a mystery too divine to ignore. And that mystery either awakens the king within him or reveals the boy who was never ready. There is a part of you that aches, not for his return, but for understanding. You replay the last moments again and again, the conversation, the touch, the silence that grew like a shadow behind his eyes. You wonder, was I too much? But this question, beloved, is a spell cast by centuries of silencing the feminine. A hypnosis that taught women to shrink themselves into palatable echoes instead of becoming the symphony they were born to be. What you must realize is this: when a man retreats in silence, what he's truly confronting is his own threshold, and you, unknowingly, brought him to it. He saw in you a woman who could not be owned. A woman whose soul was not waiting for a savior, but who stood sovereign. Open, yes, but not empty. Soft, but not submissive. In your presence, he was no longer performing. He was seen. And being seen, for a man still hiding from himself, is unbearable. So he withdraws. To avoid confronting the parts of himself, you awaken. Understand this truth with the clarity of moonlight. A man who is not initiated into the deeper aspects of his own psyche cannot hold space for the depths of yours. He may crave your body, yes. He may adore your laughter, your lightness, the way you breathe color into the grayness of his world. But when it comes to the weight of you, your knowing, your intuition, your capacity to feel without flinching, he buckles. Because you are not a distraction, you are an invitation, and invitations demand response. The silence he gives you is not an answer, it is an absence. A vacuum created by his own inability to face what intimacy requires. Surrender, truth, the death of illusion. And in that vacuum, projection grows. You begin to imagine all the reasons, all the flaws within you that must have driven him away. But none of those voices are your truth. They are echoes of your unhealed longing to be chosen. What if his distance isn't about you at all? What if it's about the battle raging within him, the battle between his archetypal warrior who wants to fight for you, and his wounded child who believes he is not enough? The feminine in her full power does not chase the man who leaves. She does not rush to fill the void he created. She holds that space, not with resentment, but with regal clarity, because she knows her worth is not diminished by his inability to meet it. So what does he think of you when he's silent? He thinks of the way you disarmed him, not with seduction, but with stillness. He remembers the way you didn't flinch when he tried to provoke you, the way you looked at him as though you could see all of him, the bravado, the fear, the softness he tried to bury. He might try to forget you. He might distract himself with another woman, someone who doesn't challenge him, someone who plays the role he's comfortable with, not the role he needs. But the feminine who awakens a man cannot be replaced. She leaves fingerprints on his psyche. She becomes a symbol in his dreams. And while you wait, not for him, but for your own clarity, you rise. Because silence does not mean the story has ended. It means the page has turned. This is your sacred pause, not to overanalyze, not to diminish yourself, but to remember who you are beneath the ache. The woman who gives presence before performance. The woman who does not convince or beg. The woman who chooses herself even in the face of absence. Let him think, let him wander, let the silence become his mirror. Because one of two things will happen. He will rise to meet you, or he will fade into the shadows of your past where only echoes remain. And either way, you win. There is a moment, silent, sacred, when a woman stands at the crossroads of her own longing. One path leads towards self-abandonment, the frantic reaching for a man who has vanished into shadows. The other path, more difficult and more divine, leads inward, towards stillness, towards self. In this moment, she becomes the alchemist of her pain. To understand what he thinks of you in his silence is not to decipher every action, every word left unsaid. It is to gaze beyond the literal into the symbolic. The man who disappears is not just a man, he becomes a test, an archetype, a mirror. He carries the energy of the absent father, the unattainable lover, the wounded masculine who cannot yet face the wholeness of the feminine. This is not about him. It never was. It is about the part of you that still believes you need him to validate your depth. You see, the feminine psyche is vast. She holds the chaos of creation, the rhythm of the moon, the wild ache of the soul's becoming. And yet for centuries she was taught to contain herself, to package her emotions, to swallow her rage, to smile through rejection, to be the cool girl, the low maintenance, the understanding. But you were not born to be digestible. You were born to be felt, deeply, wildly, unapologetically. So when he leaves in silence, and your heart flinches with the sting of confusion, know this: he is not thinking of you with indifference. He is haunted by you. Not because of what you said or didn't say, but because of what you represent. You represent the call to awaken. You represent the risk of being known. You represent the collapse of ego. And for many men, that is terrifying. When a woman is rooted in her power, not performative power, but embodied power, she becomes a force of nature, not loud, not aggressive, but undeniable. Her silence speaks volumes. Her absence burns brighter than any chase. And this is what he begins to feel when he retreats, the weight of what he left behind. He remembers your presence like a sacred fire he didn't know how to tend. He remembers how you listened, not just with ears, but with soul. He remembers the way your body held truth, the way your words cut through the noise of his performance and went straight to the center of him. But most of all, he remembers the way he could not hide from you. And this is what breaks him. Not because you exposed him to the world, but because you exposed him to himself. There is a difference between a woman who needs a man and a woman who chooses him. You, divine one, are being called to choose, not him, but you, again and again and again. Because your worth is not proven through his attention, it is revealed in how you respond to his absence. A woman of deep feminine wisdom does not collapse when a man withdraws. She expands, she deepens. She doesn't chase, because she knows that chasing a man who is fleeing himself is a betrayal of her own becoming. Let him go, not with bitterness, but with grace. Because the man who leaves a woman like you is not escaping you. He is escaping the part of himself that cannot yet rise to your level of truth. And if he ever returns, it must not be to the same version of you he left behind. Because in his absence, you've become more, not to prove a point, not to get revenge, but because pain, when transmuted, becomes power, because rejection, when alchemized, becomes redirection. He thinks of you, yes, he dreams of you even, but you are becoming untouchable, not in a cold or detached way, but in a way that says, I am not waiting, I am walking. And this is the paradox. The moment you stop needing him to understand you is the moment he begins to. There is something deeply unsettling about feminine silence. Not the silence of repression, but the silence of sovereignty. It is a silence that does not plead, does not prove, does not chase. It is the silence of a woman who has reclaimed herself. And this is what he begins to feel in the echo chamber of his own retreat. He expects your pain to cry out. He expects the softness in you to bend, to reach for him, to soothe the wound he inflicted. But instead, he is met with space, unyielding, sacred, sovereign. In that space, a man comes face to face with what Jung called his shadow, the parts of himself he has exiled, his fear of intimacy, his hunger for control, his shame, his avoidance, his deep and hidden longing for maternal love disguised as romantic conquest. And you, woman, by standing still, hold up the mirror he cannot look away from. He wonders if you're hurting. He wonders if you've moved on. He wonders how you can remain so silent when his absence once would have sent you spiraling, but that version of you, the one who bled herself dry just to be chosen, is no longer here. Something else has awakened, something ancient, something untamed. A woman does not need to scream to be heard. When she is anchored in her own truth, her very presence is a thunderclap, a quiet rebellion, a revolution without a war. He thinks of the way your energy shifted. He feels the absence of your emotional labor, the warmth that held space for his wounds, the patience that decoded his silences, the softness that made excuses for his inconsistency. And when that energy is gone, he feels the cold, not because you are punishing him, but because you have returned to yourself. You are no longer leaking your life force into his indecision, no longer offering your sacred presence to someone who cannot receive it. This is not cruelty. This is alchemy. You are no longer a woman who needs answers to validate her intuition. You felt the truth the moment he began to pull away. You felt it in your gut, in your bones, in that ancient part of you that knows when something once whole has fractured. And still, you waited, not for him, but for the voice within to grow louder than your longing. Now you understand. His silence is not the absence of care, it is the presence of fear. Not fear of you, but of what you represent. You do not simply offer love, you offer transformation. And transformation is not romantic, it is ruthless, because you, goddess, do not whisper sweet nothings. You whisper truths, and truth demands death, of illusions, of facades, of the boy who still believes love should feel like winning, not surrender. So what does he think of you when he's gone? He remembers your eyes, not for their beauty, but for their clarity, the way they pierced through his bravado, the way they didn't beg, but simply saw. He wonders if he'll ever meet someone like you again. He wonders if he already lost the woman who was meant to awaken him. But more than anything, he wonders why you're no longer looking back. Because something in him believed that you would, that your need for closure would bring you to his door one more time, that your longing would override your pride. But feminine power does not bow to longing. It bows to truth. And the truth is this: a man who leaves without a word does not deserve to be pursued with one. So you don't chase, you rise, you don't explain, you evolve, you don't collapse, you expand. And now he feels it, not just your absence, but your becoming. He's beginning to understand that silence is not just a void, it is a mirror. And in that mirror, he no longer sees the man he thought he was. He sees a boy, running from the fire of a woman who dared to burn clean through his illusions. And perhaps one day he will rise. But by then, the woman he once knew will have become a force he can no longer touch, not because she is punishing him, but because she has stepped fully into her queendom. She does not wait. She chooses. The woman who no longer waits becomes a mystery that echoes through the chambers of his mind, not because she is elusive, but because she is complete. No longer orbiting his potential, no longer tethered to the hope of his return, she has returned to something far more sacred, herself. He thinks of you now not in the way a man remembers a conquest, but in the way a pilgrim remembers a temple. The scent of incense in the air, the quiet pull to kneel, the sacred weight of a presence too vast to name. He may not say it, he may never have the language for it, but he knows something within him is different because of you. And yet his silence lingers, because what you awoke in him cannot be resolved with words. It requires initiation, a descent, a breaking open, and only he can walk that path. You were the flame, but he must choose to walk through the fire. You are not the lesson. You are the mirror through which he glimpsed the lesson, waiting in his own soul. And what about you? You, woman, who stayed loyal to your intuition even when it trembled. You who resisted the urge to beg for breadcrumbs when you were born to feast at the table of kings. You who held your heart like a sacred chalice instead of pouring it into a man who wasn't ready to drink deeply. Do you know who you've become? You've crossed a threshold, and thresholds are holy. In Jungian terms, you've stepped into the process of individuation, the sacred journey toward wholeness, where a woman withdraws her projections and stands fully in the mirror of her own becoming. You no longer see him as the source of your worth. You see him as the archetype he truly is, the uninitiated masculine, the shadow figure sent not to complete you, but to awaken you. His silence was never rejection, it was revelation. And now that you see, you cannot unsee. Let the others call it detachment, let the wounded feminine label it pride. But you know better. This isn't pride, this is sovereignty. This is the kind of stillness that rattles insecure men to their core. Not because you are closed, but because you are no longer available to be conquered. You are no longer available for confusion, for half-presence, for ghostly love dressed in potential. He thinks of you when the noise dies down, when the woman in his bed doesn't challenge him, when the drinks wear off, when the world grows quiet. That's when your name returns, not just as a memory, but as a mirror. Because you are no longer just a woman in his past. You are the call he ignored, the invitation he declined, the sacred risk he could not take. And now he is left with the hollow silence of a life unshaken by real intimacy. But you are not hollow, you are whole. You have become the woman who holds her standards like a sword and her tenderness like a sacred scroll. You have become the woman who does not explain her worth, but embodies it. And this embodiment, this radiant refusal to beg, to bend, to break, is what he will remember. Long after your face fades, your essence will remain. The way you didn't chase, the way you stood in your truth like a temple no storm could shake. The way your absence said more than any closing conversation ever could. Because the woman who knows herself is a force. And no man forgets a force. If he is meant to return, he will come not with words, but with devotion. And if he never returns, let that be his initiation, not yours. You have already crossed the fire. You have already become the woman who walks away, not in bitterness, but in knowing. Knowing that love is not proven in pursuit, it is revealed in presence. And his silence spoke volumes, volumes you no longer need to read, because you now are writing a new story. And in this story, the heroine does not chase after disappearing acts. She becomes the presence that no man can escape. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.